Welcome to your August 26th edition of Off the Mat. If you look behind us, you can see we're in a new venue. We'll get right to that in just a second, right after this. And welcome back to Off the Mat. I'm Bernard Oliver. I'm joined by, as usual, John Urcuyo and Jeremy Hurt. We've been off for a while, guys. We've been off probably about 4 weeks. How you guys been doing with the layoff?
Pretty good. It's been a nice little break, but I am definitely ready to go for Rio.
Jeremy,
I'm fantastic as always. 4 weeks off it's too much. I have to be here.
All right, well, we're going to get right into this card. UFC RIO is going down. It's the second time they've been to Brazil since, what, 1998, guys? Back when Tank Abbott and Wanderlei Silva were fighting. Vitor Belfort was fighting in that card, too. Man, it's been a long time since they've been to Brazil. They kind of call it a homecoming. How do you guys feel about them returning to Brazil?
It's an absolute fantastic thing. Rio, full of energy. MMA world has been taken over. Brazil, this is just going to be one of the biggest events UFC's ever seen.
I mean, it's the birthplace of MMA. They're going, they're going home. That really is what it is. That's where it came from. You know, originated obviously with the Gracie family, and it grew from there. It's about, you know, that melding of styles, but that's where it began. It began in Brazil, and like you said, it's coming home.
And before we get right into the card, we're gonna, give a little love to Buffalo Wild Wings. We're actually broadcasting from Buffalo Wild Wings right now. We're kind of having a little partnership with them, giving some cross promotion with them. So you guys make sure you come out tomorrow and check out the UFC fight card that's gonna be here at Buffalo Wild Wings. They always purchase the fights and they put them on, and everybody comes out here, has a great time. There's a huge crowd, a big following of MMA in Northwest Arkansas. So make sure you come out and kind of enjoy the UFC RIO that's gonna be broadcast from Buffalo Wild Wings tomorrow. But getting back into this card, the first fight we're going to go into Edson Barboza and Mr. Ross Pearson, the real deal Pearson. Now, Pearson's kind of coming off of a win streak. His last couple of fights have all been decision, though. Barboza doesn't like fights to go to decision. He fought Joe Connie. That fight went to a decision. He was really angry about it. Really didn't like the fact that it went to a decision. He's going to be coming out looking to KO or submit Ross Pearson. What's your guys' take on that fight?
Well, Ross Pearson's one of these guys where he might have been typecast a year or two ago that, he was a guy that was going to come out and try to swing for the fences and brawl with you a little. He's really starting to show that refinement in his game. Got a tall task in front of him. Barbosa's got incredible hips. He's got really good movement, very explosive. He comes forward. I think that this is one of those things you kind of expect that these two guys are going to come out and brawl, but it may be one of those things where each tries to negate that, that strength or whatever. I think this might be, there's going to be a filling out process, I think, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And with such talented guys, you've got Barboza. He's a young guy. UFC's giving him a push. And I think that's really what they're looking at now. A lot of these legends of the sport, they've been around so long, getting up into their mid to late 30s. They got to find a new crop. Guys like John Jones are looking at Barboza, and they're looking to push these guys forward so that they can start the new generation of athletes.
And he's kind of the prototypical Brazilian fighter. I mentioned like the fluidity of the hips, the explosion, the leg kicks. He's got that very traditional Brazilian kind of style, and that's largely what you're seeing in certain segments of those new stars coming up.
I really thought he reminded me a lot of Jose Aldo when I first saw him fight. The leg kicks are just so explosive, and he comes with so much power behind him. He just looks like a younger Jose Aldo, if you can really relate that, because Jose Aldo isn't really that old. But you see Barboza coming up, and he's got the same exact fighting style almost as a champion that's ruling his fight class right now. He's really not
best fighter in the world.
So, Edson Barboza is definitely taking a chip off the old block and, bringing in a lot of fighting styles and fighting prowess that Aldo has. Like you said, that Brazilian style of fighting is ruling MMA right now. That's where it started. Looks like it's where it's going back to right now.
You don't want to sleep on Ross Pearson, though. I mean, this is definitely a guy, again, very rounded skills, and you talk about a winning streak. He's beaten some named guys. Like, he's beaten some guys in that division that were considered, like, MMA is a sport where you're either going to be taking the next step or someone else is going to be taking that step away from you, and he's taken that from a few guys in a row now.
And he's beaten Dennis Seaver, which is a phenomenal kickboxer, phenomenal striker. He's beaten Andre Winter. He has a lot of guys on his resume that he's beaten that are, you know, top line guys. So Barboza has his work cut out for him. Pearson's a great wrestler. If you want to beat somebody like Barboza, like Aldo, you take him down to the ground and you wrestle him and you ground and pound him. Now that's where Pearson excels at. But moving on to our next fight. This next fight, Brendan Schaub and Minotauro Nogueira, Big Nog, coming out of, I guess, a little hiatus. You know, he's been off for over a year and a few months. A lot of people say that ring rust is going to give him, you know, the underhand. He's not going to be able to fight Brendan Schaub on the level that Schaub has. Schaub coming off a win against Mirko Krokop. A lot of people think that Minotauro is just going to, you know, kind of fold over and not win this fight. I don't think that, but I want to know what you guys think first.
Well, Schwab, he definitely is getting a big head right now, considering himself a legend killer, as he's proclaimed. But I don't think that he really is respecting Nogueira, a guy who's been around in MMA since, I don't know, what, 30 years? He's a legend in the sport. He may look like a 90-year-old.
He's been on the earth for 30 years, about 36 years.
The guy is tougher than nails, and he's going, you know, he's a Brazilian. He, right back there, he is the equivalent of Randy Couture in Brazil. Everyone loves him. He is fantastic. He just gives everyone such exciting fights. He lasts so long. In his past couple, he has been a little bit absent, but you know, I think going home is really the help he needs to kind of push forward and get back on the right path.
Jeremy, do you think the ring rust is really going to affect him, or do you think, I've heard he's in the best shape of his life. Rumors say he's in the best shape of his life. You don't want to fight Minotauro Nogueira in the best shape of his life.
I don't think necessarily ring rust is going to come into play. I think the reality of a changing dynamic within mixed martial arts is going to come into play. Big Nogueira fan, always have been for years. But you know, the reality is that there's an arc to the MMA career that, you know, with the exception of Randy Couture, pretty much everyone follows, and he's pretty clearly on the downside. This is a guy that was considered maybe the best boxer in that class a few years ago. Today, you got to think if he stands in front of Schaub, which I don't know that he's quick enough to really, you know, stay outside. I think he's going to have to stand in front of him, and I don't think that ends well for him. He's going to have to get Schaub to the ground.
Well, guys, who do you give the edge to in this fight? I'm going to give it to Minotauro Nogueira. I feel like his experience is going to overpower, you know, maybe Brendan Schaub's surprise KO power. I give the edge to Minotauro Nogueira.
I'm definitely going to have to go with Nogueira as well. The guy's got, you know, just eons and eons of fights, and he's a tough guy, and he's going home. He's going to have the support of all those fans.
I think Nogueira's got better technique, more experience, more of everything you look for. I think it's a young man's game. I like Brendan Schaub in this fight.
All right, that's going to do it for us, guys, for this segment. When we come back, we'll break down the rest of the card right after the break.
We've all been there before, but there's no reason for all the frustration. Quality Writing Center is here to help. Meet with someone face-to-face on the 3rd floor of Kemple, or just upload your paper online. Take advantage of the skills you can develop at the Quality Writing Center today.
Welcome back to Off the Mat. Once again, we are in Buffalo Wild Wings off West Joyce Boulevard next to the Northwest Arkansas Mall. Like I said before, we're having a little partnership with them. They decided they wanted to sponsor us. They saw the great talent up here in front of the camera, the talent behind the camera, and you know, they wanted to come and give us a little shot. So we're up here taking a shot. We're going to get back into the card right now. The next fight is a fight that I'm so excited about. Shogun Rua versus Forrest Griffin. Now this fight, I don't even know which way to pick it. Of course I'm going to, because that's what we do up here, we pick fights. But there's so many different ways this fight can go. You have the aggressiveness of Shogun Rua, you have the size and power of Forrest Griffin. What do you guys think about this fight?
Oh, it's amazing. Griffin, Rua 2, it's just full excitement. Another, you know, we're in Rio. Shogun's got his work cut out for him. He's come into this fight. People look at their first meeting when Rua was first introduced to the UFC, first introduced to the Octagon, had his injury, but was still ranked number 2 in the world. Came in, was the heavy favorite, and fell, you know, going the distance. People said he's always had problems with his cardio. That's the question in this whole matchup. Is he ready to go all the way with Griffin?
Well, I think, you know, a lot of people, of course, when Shogun lost the first fight, a lot of them said it was because he'd had that delay, and you've seen that when Shogun's come off of a delay, he hasn't always been at his best. There's no question it's a world-class fighter. I think the book on Forrest Griffin's pretty much been written. You know what you got with Forrest Griffin. If you can overwhelm him with strikes, then you can beat Forrest Griffin. Anderson Silva showed it. Keith Jardine's shown it. We've seen it time and time again. If you will get in his face and just keep coming at him, keep coming after him, eventually he will wilt. He's a very tough guy, but he's simply not technically at that level. And I think Shogun is. I think the first matchup was a bad stylistic matchup for Shogun at where each fighter was at that point. I think that this fight is a bad stylistic matchup for Forrest Griffin with where each fighter.
And I agree there. And you talk about the cardio of Shogun Rua, and which sometimes that is a problem. But think about the cardio of Forrest Griffin versus Rich Franklin. After that fight, he won the fight. He beat Franklin. It was a great fight. Loved that, watching that fight. But he was on the ground after the fight. He was very gassed in that last round. Maybe even the second round, he was very gassed. And you kind of just look at that like, I wonder. And he was off for a while before that, of course. But you kind of just wonder, how much can you get done training in between that Franklin fight and this Rua fight? And how hard has Shogun Rua been training after losing to John Jones in such an embarrassing fashion? I mean, he was super overpowered by John Jones. You don't think he's going to come out and be pissed that he lost his belt in the way that he did and fight Forrest Griffin with everything that he's got? You probably shouldn't be watching MMA.
If there's something that can be said about Brazilians as a people, I think pride would be way up on that list.
Definitely.
I'm not sure that Mauricio Shogun Rua is coming home to Rio de Janeiro in front of Brazilians and losing a fight. And unless, you know, you're going to have to cut his leg off. I don't see cardio coming into play in this fight at all. Forrest Griffin's proven throughout his career that he's going to go in there and bang until the final whistle blows. And, you know, if he's dead tired, he's still going to be standing in the pocket and he's still going to be swinging. That's just Forrest Griffin. He's a fighter. I mean, that's just it. Forrest Griffin's just a fighter. Again, though, Shogun Rua, you put a Brazilian in a cage in Brazil, I mean, Vanderlei didn't really come through, but, you know, he's fighting Vitor, and that was a long time. I'm just saying, I think Shogun, I don't think you're going to have to worry about his cardio. I think, if anything, you're going to have to worry about, you know, getting them to stop whenever the bell actually rings.
Well, and coming up with Griffin, I know that lately he's been talking about how his love for the sport of MMA is kind of dissipating and that he is seeing the sport as more of work, you know, putting in work. He doesn't enjoy his training as much. I don't think his head's really all wrapped around this fight. Plus, going down to Rio, there's no American translators all over the place. Everything's in Portuguese. I think that he's got a lot on his mind other than this fight, and it's really going to affect his performance.
Definitely out of his element down in Brazil. That's a good point.
Forrest Griffin used to say, "I'm just a dog, man. You put me in a cage, I'm just a dog." Well, the reality is sometimes when you housebreak a dog, you lose some of that animal instinct. He learned the first time he fought Tito Ortiz and lost a close decision. He learned in that fight that just going out there and brawling with people wasn't going to work. He had to understand how to be a physical fighter, how to be a technical fighter, and how to have game plans and execute them. And I think, again, sometimes, you know, you housebreak the dog and they're not, you know, that animal instinct's not there as much, and maybe he's lost a little bit of that love for the sport and a little bit of that drive. Again, though, Forrest Griffin, when he goes in a cage and they close the door, he's going to step in the pocket. He's going to fight. That's what he is. It's in his DNA.
I have no question of his heart, but maybe the fire, you know, burning in his back is kind of dwindling a little bit.
And he's already beaten Shogun once. I mean, that's already in the books and it's never going away. What is his motivation to do it again in Rio?
Anderson Silva said it best, going back to the point that they're in Brazil, they're in Rio de Janeiro. Anderson Silva said it best. It's Brazil versus the world. And I don't think the world has a very good chance versus Brazil. When we're in the world of MMA, you're talking about where MMA started. You're talking about the Gracies. You're talking about Shoot Box. You're talking about all those guys. At one point, when there was 3 out of the 5 champions were Brazilian fighters, and they weren't being touched by anyone. Then you had John Jones coming to dethrone Shogun Rua, but Aldo and Silva are still not being touched by anyone, and that shows. That shows that the Brazilians in the sport know what they're doing. They know what they're doing down there in camp. They know how to fight. They know how to bang it out with the best of them, anybody.
The thing to remember is for most of the world, MMA is about, what, 18, 19 years old? Mm-hmm. In Brazil, it's like 118, 119 years old. It's a big difference. And Brazil is a large country with a pretty diverse, populace. So you've got athletes who've been in this sport for so long, and you have that large of a pool of athletes to choose from. Again, I think it's going to be tough in a lot of these cases to beat a Brazilian in Brazil.
Well, guys, coming off of that, we're going to go into our final break. When we get back, we'll break down these 2 guys Yushin Okami and Anderson Silva, and probably one of the most epic fights of the year, coming up right after this. I'm Bernard Oliver, and I'm joined by John Orcuyo to my right and Jeremy Hurt to my left.
Tap, Snap, or Nap is our feature where you, the viewer, get to guess what's going to happen.
That's his game plan. He knew what he wanted to do.
Is very devastating on his feet.
It was textbook the whole time through.
He's just got that swagger about him that he just doesn't care who you are, what you're about. He's going to come out and he's going to punch you in the face.
Welcome to this week's edition of Off the Mat. We have a lot of things planned for you guys. We have a lot of topics to cover. Welcome back to Off the Mat. We're about to get into this main event, a fight that people have been talking about since it was scheduled. Anderson the Spider Silva versus Yushin Thunder Okami. Now this fight has a lot going behind it. You have a fighter in Yushin Okami who might be able to come and dethrone the champion. I don't think he's going to dethrone the champion. I think the only way that's going to happen is if you have Silva son in two, and that's the only person I think that has a chance of beating Anderson Silva right now. I don't see Yushin coming in and doing that. But Yushin, a very capable fighter. Anderson Silva, the longest reigning champion in the UFC. Do you need to say any more than that?
Absolutely not. I mean, Anderson Silva, unbelievable fighter. Every time it's highlights from this guy. Coming off of an unbelievable knockout front kick to Vito Belfort. He's going to Brazil where he is a pure icon. This guy, Nike deals. He's almost as big as Pele down there. I think he is just gonna put on, this guy is at the top of his game. He is a legend already in the sport, and I don't see Okami coming out on top in this one.
Let me start by saying, at this point in the game, today, August 26, 2011, when you look at resumes, I think you can make a real good case that there's pretty much Anderson Silva and Fedor Emelianenko all time. And those are your top two guys, and you could argue that. When you talk about resumes, nobody's ever done what Anderson Silva's done in the biggest, most popular, most deepest organization in the world in this sport. He's completely controlled it for a long time.
Definitely.
And so like I said, you look at the resume, it's Fedor, it's Silva, and there's really nobody else on that list for the greatest that's ever lived. Yushin Okami, I've never been a real big believer in Yushin Okami, but how many times have we said this? Styles make fights. And I think one thing that we've seen over the years, you think about when Hendo fought him, you think about what Chael Sonnen did for 4.5 rounds against him. A disciplined wrestler who will stay in the right posture and who will keep in the right position when they're on the ground can do a lot of damage to Anderson Silva. When you look at the rounds that he's lost in the UFC, round 1 against Henderson, that's what Henderson did. The first 5 rounds against Chael Sonnen, that's what Chael Sonnen did. You don't get crazy with Anderson Silva. You get disciplined. You get him to the ground, you stay disciplined, you stay in your posture, you look for your opportunities to strike, you look for your opportunities to beat him up and punish him. And I think that's where Yushin Okami comes in, because this is a very disciplined fighter. Disciplined, boring, whatever you want to call it. Yushin Okami is a guy, he's got the record he has for a reason. He's won the fights he's won for a reason, and that's because he has a game plan and he executes it. And his game plan in this particular scenario happens to match up very well. I don't think he'll hold the title more than one fight, but I think he matches up very well to possibly take this title from Anderson Silva.
And when you talk about resumes, you look at Yushin Okami's resume, and he's beat fighters like Nate Marquardt, one of the top fighters in the division, Mark Munoz, another one of the top fighters in the division at one point in time. He has a resume. He has, like you were saying, Anderson Silva might be up there for the greatest fighter of all time, but Okami coming into this fight, Anderson is almost looking like Forrest, one of those guys that's like, I'm kind of getting on to my years. I've held the belt I'm the longest reigning champion in the UFC. It's almost time for me to walk away. If this was his last fight, it would not surprise me. And him having that mindset going into the fight, of course Anderson Silva is going to come in the fight, training for Okami, being the fighter that Anderson Silva is. But if he did lose this fight to Okami, you might want to start thinking about that kind of thing. Like he said, he's getting on in his years. He's done everything. What hasn't he done? Who hasn't he beat? Okami's just kind of one of those guys that's around. It's like, well, he's next in line. Everybody else that's in his class, that's top tier with Anderson Silva, he's destroyed. Precision striking, power, and just that long lankiness and that weave game that he has when people are throwing punches at him, they can't hit him. You can't hit him. And the best thing, like you said, to do, Chael Sonnen, take him down and hold him on the ground and hope that his jiu-jitsu doesn't come through from the ground like it did against Sonnen.
Well, and Okami, you know, after losing to Sonnen, goes in, asks him for help, starts training with him, and pretty much learns the game plan that Sonnen used against Anderson that was so effective. I think that's exactly what he's going to have to do. I just think Anderson Silva, you know, I'm sure he's preparing for that. I think that he knows that's exactly the same game plan that he's going to be dealing with, and he's going to have to, you know, be able to adapt to any kind of wrestling technique that Okami tries to throw at him.
That's very true, but then again, he knew what Chael Sonnen was going to do when Chael Sonnen walked into that octagon. Everybody in the building knew exactly what the game plan of each fighter was. You know, we talk about career arcs. You talk about that, you know, kind of being at the end of his career. I don't believe that for a second. I'm leaning Okami right now. I don't feel like Anderson Silva, like his best days are behind. Again, it's just kind of a situation. I don't think it's even going to be necessarily. Again, this is Brazil. Anderson Silva's coming in there to kill someone because he's in Brazil and he's in fight in front of his people. And he's maybe the cockiest guy, non-Chael Sonnen in the sport. So, you know, emotionally, I think Anderson's going to be very ready for this fight. I do think he'll fight an intelligent fight. Again, I just feel like the matchup at this point for each fighter, I think it leans a little more in Okami's direction. It's kind of like the book's been open and a couple pages have been turned, and you kind of know what to look for. And again, I think the discipline against a guy like Anderson Silva, because physically, technique-wise, the things that he's able to do, you're not going to beat Anderson Silva in that direction. You're simply going to have to beat him up here, and you're going to have to stick with what you got up here.
And you can't let the hype get in your head, yo, of Anderson Silva. Going into the ring with somebody like that, the shadow behind Anderson Silva when you look across that ring is huge. It's probably out of the arena when you look across that ring.
He's MMA Mike Tyson. You know, back in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever Mike Tyson walked down, you know, whenever you saw him start coming down the aisle, you knew that someone was about to get the crap kicked out of him. And you knew that. And his opponents knew that. His opponents knew, I'm probably going to, you know, get an IV here in a few minutes. And that's kind of the thing you get with Anderson Silva. Yushin Okami's not worried about it. I promise you, Yushin Okami's not worried about that.
He looks completely focused at the weigh-ins today. If you guys got to see the weigh-ins that came on today, he looked completely focused. Of course, they went and they interviewed Anderson Silva, and Silva looked a lot calmer than, you know, he usually does. He's really become a lot more laid back than he's not the dancing, you know, the get in the middle of the ring, turn, flip, that kind of guy. But both of the fighters really looked calm. Okami didn't look like he was afraid at all. And that's kind of one of those things I've been talking about the past couple months. I kind of wait until they come to the ring to see the look in their eyes, because you can tell a lot by how a guy walks to the ring. You saw Tito walk to the ring when he beat Bader. You saw him, he was jumping around. It's like, man, Tito kind of looks a little bit different than he's been looking the last 5 years. He looks pumped up, and Bader, you know, kind of came out kind of normal. I would like to wait and see how they're going to walk out, you know, get to see the look in their eyes before I make my pick, but of course we're not going to do that. Okami, like I said, he looks very calm right now. He's probably going to be calm until the day he gets into the ring. Like you said, he's very disciplined, and that's what you need against Anderson Silva. You need discipline. You need to go into the ring knowing what you're going to do, and you need to execute it. That's the only way to beat Anderson.
Yeah, again, I don't think emotions are playing into this fight. In every other fight of the night, I think that you have to kind of put that on the scales and see which way it leans. But in this one, I really think it's going to be a case, get him down, keep your posture right, you know, keep your arms where they need to be, keep your hands off the mat, and just look for your opportunities to punish him. It's a decision win. He's not knocking Anderson Silva out. He's not submitting Anderson Silva. And, you know, Anderson Silva's corner's not throwing any towels. It's going to be a grinder. It's going to be 25 minutes of punishment.
I can see it going, you know, maybe even the entire distance, but I just don't see Anderson Silva, you know, the Michael Jordan of Brazil, in the United Center, his home court, in front of all these fans, people that truly love him, and letting down all those people in Brazil. I just don't see it. I think he's going to be so excited, so juiced up, so ready to go that Okami's just not going to be able to deal with it.
I mean, even Michael Jordan played for the Wizards. You know, let's not forget those.
That's a good.
And again, I'm not saying
reference.
Anderson Silva's anywhere near the end, but there's a study I read a couple months ago about how typically 9 years from your first high-profile fight is about as long as you got, no matter who you are in mixed martial arts, with the exception of guys like Randy Couture. You know, there's these one-offs. Anderson's kind of reaching that point where when you talk about career arcs, and again, his is a little different because his career arc was like Lieben, Franklin, there for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But at what point do you say he's been in a lot of fights? You know, he's been through it a lot of times, and like maybe the dial started to turn a little bit.
Well, if you think about it, a lot of those fights didn't last.
He didn't take a lot of punishment.
A couple minutes, and he is one of the most elusive fighters in the UFC and just MMA altogether.
As Forrest Griffin.
Yeah, exactly.
To relate it to another sport, he's almost like, say, a running back in the NFL that doesn't get tackled. You know, usually the average of running back is in the NFL, it's about 3 or 4 years. That's a bruiser. That's a guy who's running at the line, trucking guys, running them over every time. Anderson Silva's one of those guys that you toss to on the sweep. You throw him outside, and he gets away from everybody, and he scores for you. That's kind of what he does in the ring. Like you said, he took a lot of punishment against Sonnen. There's not a lot of fights where he took a lot of punishment. So I agree with Jeremy that I don't feel like he's at the end of his rope. That's just his words. You know, he's saying, you know, what else is there for me to do in the sport? Kind of like GSP, you know?
That's Anderson Silva. He was saying that 3 years ago. He was saying, I'm ready to retire. I've done everything I want to do. I've defended the belt like 4 times. I'm good.
That's true. That's true.
That's partly just Anderson Silva. The thing is, with your analogy, I like your analogy. He's kind of the Felix Jones get to the sideline. The problem is the Chael Sonnen fight was a little bit like Steve Atwater coming full speed and hitting him as he was catching. He took some damage versus Sonnen. He got beat down.
I was worried for him in that fight. I've seen him get beat on the ground. I was just like, come on, man. Might have something on this game right now.
And in the fighting sports, it's not about how many big shots you've taken. It's about how much damage you've accumulated. It's all about building on what's come before. That's why you got guys like Nogueira, guys like Chuck Liddell, who were unstoppable for years, and then all of a sudden, it's easy to turn their lights off because it's built up. It's not just an issue of one time. Again, you don't get beat up for 5 rounds. I don't care who you are. Nobody gets beat up for 5 rounds without some kind of artifact from that down the road.
That's a good point. And, well, guys, I guess we're going to go into another break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about this Fox merger. Fox Television has picked up MMA, and MMA will now be, in November, I believe, broadcast on local television channels. More of that when we come back from the break. Welcome back to your final segment of Off the Mat. Guys, we got a little bit of time here. We're going to talk about this Fox merger that's going on. I know Jeremy texted me in the morning. I was sleeping. Jeremy texted me and I woke up and I was like, no, that's not true. Fox has entered a contract with the UFC. I believe the Ultimate Fighter is going to be on FX, and there will be live UFC events on Fox local TV. That's huge. MMA now enters with the rest of the big sports, with the footballs and the basketballs and the baseballs. Might be at the bottom of the barrel right now, but it's up there with those big sports, and I'm ecstatic about this, guys. This makes things for us, like people like us, are great now. Everybody reporting on MMA.
We talk about arcs. MMA's arc just took a decided turn up, and the reason why is until this point the appeal was pay $50 and get to watch a night of fights. Now the appeal is if you got rabbit ears on your TV and a digital tuner, I guess, then you can watch fights. It's a major, major difference. You talk about the market that's available on broadcast television as opposed to cable television or on pay-per-views. I mean, it's not even comparable. Just one thing real quickly, you mentioned the live events. Ultimate Fighter on FX, they're actually going to be doing their fights, their weekly elimination fights on Fridays, I believe. Going to be live. We're going to have live elimination fights on the Ultimate Fighter. What's better than that?
Absolutely a monumental thing for the sport. No way to get bigger. Only up. It's a huge jump. And now, you know, MMA's got nowhere else to go but to jump up with these NFL, NBA, and those numbers. And now everybody can watch. There's no discrimination. I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I'm so excited.
I've been saying for about 10 years, since the moment I know Bernard, he can tell you I've been saying this. The moment that you know that everything's changed is the moment that the UFC, the biggest boys in the room, sign a contract with broadcast television. That day's happened. It's wonderful. This is the biggest day in the history of MMA.
Celebrate.
You can see how ecstatic we are about it. I'm sure you guys will be happy about it too. That's going to do it for us this week on Off the Mat. I'm Bernard. That's John Arcrio. That's Jeremy Hurt. Don't forget, for free, you can come to Buffalo Wild Wings, no cover charge, and watch UFC 134 tomorrow at 8:30. That's going to do it for us this week, guys. We'll see you at the fights.